Hello.
So, Graham, it's another week, and we've tantalized our listeners with the prospect of talking about Stereolab playing live in Leeds. And you decided quite rightly that there wasn't time last week to discuss that, but we could look at it in more detail this week. And
Oh,
my
I've got
confusion,
a quick interruption.
are they a
I've got a
British
quick
band with a
interruption.
French singer, or
I've
are
got a
they
quick
a French
interruption.
band anyway?
I've still got a quick interruption. Quick
Oh, sorry,
interruption.
you were going to interrupt.
Yeah, you know how I like mocking Ed Sheeran, but not as much
Yes.
as I like mocking André Rieu. And
No.
André Rieu got some exciting news about him. He's the world's one of the world's successful violinists and musicians, and he tours the world with his Johann Strauss orchestra, and he plays to 500,000 people live each year. 500,000 people see him live each year. The guy's absolutely phenomenal, but he's also chintzy as hell. He makes his concerts a bit like a Viennese chocolate
Is he
cake,
is he the
real elaborate,
Liberace of
ornate.
today, Graham?
Possibly, yeah, but he's also I find him simultaneously he's obviously talented, but I find him so irritating because he's so chintzy, so he makes James Last and Richard Clayderman look like Sex Pistols. He's that sort of like obvious and sentimental, and with his poodle-like haircut and his perpetual smile. But anyway, the good news is, if you're an Andy Rieu fan,
Yes.
there's a new live cinema broadcast of a couple of concerts he's doing early in January, and this is classic. André Rieu in Dublin. He's finally managed to get the Irish theme going because he does themes for every possible thing in place in the world, and he's finally alighted on Dublin and Ireland. And so the poster for the concerts he's doing, which are going to be broadcast across British cinemas, has got a dirty big shamrock in it. And
All he needs now, Graham.
If there's one thing that Andre Rieu certainly isn't, it's Irish because he's not a man for the crack, is he? Let's face it.
He is not a man for the crack. But on the other hand, could you imagine a combination of Andrew Rieu and Michael Flatley together? How about
Oh, I would probably be sick on the spot. That just sounds hideous.
that? I hate New Year's concerts because it means it's a new year, and they all somehow think go to Austria and play hideous music in a happy way. And you think, nah, nonsense,
Yeah,
loathsome.
it's like people dancing on the edge of a cliff.
Yeah, entirely that.
Can't
And
they
I'd
see that
willingly
they're
push
living
over
in
that
a
cliff.
tarnished world? Can't they see that everybody's as rich and wealthy and happy as they are?
I think that you've hit on it as well. It's that revolting sense of wealth about those concerts.
Mm. It's just
Anyway,
like bling. It's bling made into music.
Dublin the value. Well, I'm sure the Irish crackle will thrill Rio to new heights of ghastliness. So, Graham,
Yeah, but it'll be
thank you for
popular.
that
That's for
interruption and bringing up the. I mean, I really could do without Rio at the start of it.
sure.
Anyway, we were discussing briefly their Stereolab, and my slight
Oh
confusion:
yeah. Hmm.
are they an English band with a French singer, or are they actually a French band?
They were formed in London in 1990 with
Mm,
Tim Gain, who's definitely English, but the main singer is Laetitia Sadier, who's
yeah.
definitely French. So they're
Mm,
French English basically,
mm,
and they last did a new album in 2010, but they've been touring again. I think it got delayed during the lockdown, but they
yeah.
were back on tour again, and I last saw them in 1999 inside a tent at Leeds Festival,
Yeah.
and
So, where did
when
you
I was
see them
doing
this time, Graham?
Well, I was doing Charm Magazine then, and the interesting thing
Mm,
then was that they were quite mysterious because the music they were making wasn't being done by anybody else on
no.
the planet, and they looked a bit, slightly enigmatic and mysterious, and they were using a theremin live on stage, so it was all very exotic, and it seemed like the future. So then I thought, oh, they're on tour again. Let's go and see what they're like now. So I went to Stylus at Leeds University to catch them nearly
Which
25 years
is
later.
not exactly a to the future type venue, is it? It's basically a university. Is it a refectory or something? Is it
Yeah,
Stylus?
it's part of the refectory, but it's not the main part of the university where the Who recorded live at Leeds.
No,
It's a smaller, and it's got two levels, including a balcony. And the great thing about the balcony is if you're short, and I'm not saying I'm short by the way, but if you are short, you can
which
still
I
see the
am.
stage. Whereas
Mm.
downstairs amongst the crowd, you're always surrounded by people who are tall, so you can't
Who
see. So it's quite a handy
arrive at the
venue.
last
It's quite a
minute
handy venue. Mm.
So you
Anyway, they were
proposing the
interested.
idea that they're going back to the future again. So what was futuristic this time? Last time you mentioned the theremin, not again something I think is particularly a radical instrument, but what this year was new to suggest they're futuristic after a 10-year gap.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing about that is that at the time there were a sort of like unique blend of many different attributes, which were all a bit obscure at that point before they became trendier and more fashionable.
Mm.
Because they were into Brazilian MOR music from the 60s, they were into electronica, which was still a bit out there. They were into like the Velvet Underground and late 1960s Beach Boys, and they were into minimalism. And they were sort of dream pop before dream pop
Mm.
expression was coined. And they like to use old fashioned 70s analog synthesizers.
Yeah.
And so they were retro plus futuristic because they didn't do big choruses. In fact, there was no emotional climaxes in any of the songs. They were sort of like they got in a groove and stayed in the groove, sort of like a laid back French version of krautrock. So a sort of pleasanter, more baroque version of krautrock.
Mm.
But occasionally a little bit of noise, occasionally a little bit of feedback. And the lyrics were always a bit sort of like semi-cultural, semi-political, and quite obtuse, sort of like
Yes.
early Scritti Politti lyrics when they were really interesting before they had pop hits. So they were sort of like doing things that no one else was doing at the time while still looking backwards. And when I saw them live again at Stylus in October, they didn't look mysterious anymore, and they didn't
No.
look enigmatic. And their
No.
music at first was so familiar, not because Stereolab are familiar to me, even though they are, but because so many bands that are happening now or that happened 10 years ago are using bits of the Stereolab template, not the whole Stereolab template because there's so much in it anyway, but little bits. So all the stuff they did that seemed a bit weird back in the 1990s is all being sucked up almost into the mainstream. So at first I was a bit underwhelmed. I thought, ooh, they're a bit more ordinary and mumsy looking than I
Mm.
remember them. A bit disappointed. But after a while, you start to realize that their beauty and the greatness is so broad and subtle
Mm.
that no one still to this day can do what Stereolab does. And they basically were playing to please themselves. They're not like crowd pleasers. They play
No.
music that they love playing together and they love the act of playing together. And so by the end, you thought, well, people still haven't caught with them. They still don't sound like now.
Mm.
They've still taken things further than anybody else has taken them in all those different genres they bring together.
Yeah.
And so I thought, yeah, there's still the future. They haven't dated at all.
Within this, was there any new compositions within the set at all, Graham?
No, they haven't done a new album since 2010. And
Mm.
to be frank, they recorded so many albums when they were together
They were
that I've only got
prodigious, weren't they? Mm.
I've only got 4 albums. So
Mm.
we could have I didn't recognize half the set list. At least it
No.
wasn't a greatest hit set list. Again,
No.
they were doing it. It was almost like they were doing it to reconnect with their own Stereolabness. They were trying
Yes.
to go back to their artistic roots of being just a band who did interesting music. They weren't there like like greatest hits tour. This was
No.
them being proper Stereolab, which again was to their credit.
Mm. Mm. So maybe this is a spark for a new burst of creativity from them. Maybe this is that. I mean, that's happened before with bands where they've got together to remember the old days, to get the band back together again, and then lo and behold, have gone out and made a new album, as Shed 7, for example, have done exactly that, having regrouped several times. They finally got round to making a new album. So who knows? We await with interest. Now, Graham,
Yeah, I think they should do. I think it'd be good if they did it.
yeah, we shall see what happens with that. Now, just a little interruption, if you may, because you mentioned about a top actress's message of hope for the future of the Edinburgh International Film Festival. Which actress or actor, as we're now invited to say, are we
Obviously,
referring to?
it's going to be Tilda Swinton because she's a patron of
Yes,
the Edinburgh National Film Festival, has been for a long time. I mean, she's also close friends with Mark Cousins, the
yes,
former film festival director, whose latest film about the rise of fascism in 1920s Italy was a big hit at Cannes.
mm,
So she was always going to support it, and she's such an amazing actress. She's had such a prolific career for such a long time, mainly bit left field in her roles, but then she'll turn up suddenly in a big Marvel movie. So she's totally unpredictable and highly respected by everybody because she's not only a great actress, she's got amazing taste. She does interesting projects the whole
Yeah.
time. So I think this year she had two films out, 3,000 Years of Longing and The Eternal Daughter. And next year she's going to be in Wes Anderson's new film called Asteroid City. So she's a heavyweight player. But she's saying that, obviously it'd be terrible if the Edinburgh National Film Festival did not come back after it was set up in 1947. But she says she's totally convinced that the spirit behind the festival is so strong that it will survive, although she did think it would come back in a new incarnation. And I didn't really know what new incarnation meant, but she was quite confident it was going to survive, which is good news.
I mean, there is a possibility, I suppose, by which Filmhouse does not return, but Film Festival does.
Well, yeah, I think that's what's going to happen.
That is the more likely option, it would seem to me now.
Yeah, I think you're right.
It doesn't take much for owners of buildings to decide, right, we're moving on, we're going to do something else. That ruthlessness we know about within the arts world so often that would happen, sadly. But that's the way it goes. Now, Graham, I mentioned just something actually from York that I think the reason I want to talk about this, and this is, have you been to see Van Gogh, the immersive experience? Have you been to this?
Well, I went to the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam in October. Then we saw millions of Van Gogh, so I feel Van Goghed out.
Okay, well, maybe you won't want to Van Gogh to it, but it's been a huge success story. I mean, it's been rolled out elsewhere in this country, including in Leicester and London. It's been rolled out in New York. But York was the first place that this immersive exhibition was shown in Britain, and started in 2019. It was expected to be only there for 6 months, and it's ended up still being there. And this year alone, it has been extended 3 times, now till March 2023. And what I think is interesting about this is that it is potentially showing a vision of how more exhibitions might be in the future. In that the way it works is it's to say 2-part is even sort of 3-part on one level of section. But when you go in, you're in the nave of York St Mary's, so a former church in Castlegate, and within that, it is 360 degrees, so 4 walls, and on all those walls will be animated and projected.
Is this a real experience, or are you wearing those goggles?
So part 2 or even part 3 does involve goggles. But this part, instead, basically you're invited to sit down in a deck chair. Now, obviously, a deck chair only faces one way, but you just have to crick your neck, really. And so in that first space, you'll see as many as 200 paintings by Van Gogh. And it's also telling the story behind them. Some of it is a voiceover by an actor using the words of Van Gogh, and Van Gogh, however you wish to pronounce it. And it is an absolute assault on the senses in every way. And I think that's what's so thrilling about it, but it's also informative as well. So visually stunning, but also the oral side of it works really strongly. And it's beautiful to see church walls used in that way. And it is all encompassing. It is absolutely immersive. So that experience in that first part of it lasts 35 minutes, but you can dip in and out. So you could go to another part of the exhibition and then come back again if you don't want to overload the senses. So you've then got an opportunity to see Van Gogh vases, which again are done in the projected animated style. Then you could, if you so wish, you could actually there's an opportunity to paint in the style of Van Gogh. So it's essentially you're painting in his style, and you'll see the results of that being projected on the wall.
I take it that requires very little skill. They've arranged it so that any old idiot could do a Van Gogh.
Yeah, I think it's ready, steady, Van Gogh on that one. So
okay.
But the last part, which is an extra expense, it is a £3 extra expense. But I think that this is the part that's particularly worth it, because this is the virtual reality experience.
Your ear doesn't come off, does it? You don't lose an ear.
Actually, surprise, surprise, Graham. The one thing they don't show is Van Gogh They don't recreate in animation Van Gogh chopping his ear off. We don't. Surprisingly, it's not considered in good taste, Graham. I wonder why. So anyway, in that last part, so there's no horror movie to it at all. But in the last part, it's virtual reality. So that's headset time. And it's recreating when he was living in Arles in France. He was incredibly prolific in those last years, died, as we know, at the age of 37, taking his own life. But prodigious in those last years. And what it's creating...
Well, some of his best paintings were just at the end. So a lot of the classics that everybody pays 22 million for, etc., were done in his last year,
including the chair that was in the room that he had in Arles. So so they recreate that room. So it's as if you're in that room, and then you walk out with the aid of virtual reality into the streets and scenes of Arles, and it recreates therefore, and before your very eyes, it's recreating paintings as he would have been creating them, and with the sounds of where he was. And why I say this is a potentially kind of future exhibition experience that you could extend beyond Van Gogh is that it absolutely fills you with playful imagery. It's also informative, so it plays on all levels, and it absolutely engages you. There are times that you might go around an exhibition and not feel particularly involved, not feel particularly moved, maybe not connect with it, and it's that thing that you are just looking at a static painting. That's fine,
but it's not. You're not actually seeing the real painting, and as you know, a digital representation of a painting in no way captures exactly what the painting is like.
There's Graham the naysayer, and I understand that, because one of the things that's interesting, if you go to, for example, go to the Louvre and you see how tiny the Mona Lisa is, absolutely tiny. And you can only, you can't really get close up for more than a few seconds because everyone else is trying to do the same. So I accept your point on that level, but I think I don't think it would be wrong to suggest that this technique of the digital in any way cheapens it. I don't think it does. I think it opens up new opportunities within the art to look at it and to appreciate it. So I think it's got many merits to it.
Yeah, it does sound extremely entertaining, and if you know nothing about Van Gogh, Gogh, you would actually learn a lot by going there. And I'm sure I'd enjoy it as well, despite my attempt to be negative about it. But I still think I'd swap all that just to see one of his great paintings in the flesh.
Or to do what you did to actually go to see a huge collection. I'd take that on board, Graham. I just think what's interesting is that you potentially have more than one route to doing that now, to bringing art alive.
Well, it sounds to me a bit like that classic Woody Allen line from his comedies in the 70s when you could actually mention his name without getting in trouble. And at one point he says in one of those big films from the 70s, sex without love is an empty experience, but as empty experiences go, it's one of the best.
I think that Van Gogh is a higher level than that onanistic joke. But anyway, thank you for that, Graham. well worth having. Now, I feel, let's go, if we may, with an interruption. I'm going to choose between one or the other, and then we'll do the big topic of your day. The link between Arctic Monkeys and Frank Sinatra, because I want to know what the link is.
Yeah, well,
so tell me the link.
Everybody said that the Car album. Well, the Car album, everybody said it sounds like Richard Hawley or Scott Walker. And then when
do you know who it sounds like, Graham? Do you know who it sounds like?
It doesn't sound like Scott Walker or Richard Hawley.
I'll tell you who it sounds like. The singer of Frankie Goes to Hollywood sings like. He is sounding like Frankie Goes to Hollywood, really? Mr. Johnson.
I never thought of that. I think he's better than that, but I know what you mean. Holly Johnson's a good singer, by the way.
The Power of Love, Holly Johnson. Yeah.
Indeed. Is it a Christmas song or not? That's the question. Is it a Christmas song?
It was a Christmas number one-ish. It was a number one in that month.
The video shows it to be a bit of a piss take, really. It's not. It's so over the top, and it's Christmas. But anyway, the Arctic Monkeys. Like I heard that the album Car, which is a great album, favorite album of the year, and I thought this sounds more like Frank Sinatra's Watertown album from 1970 when he briefly dipped his toe in a sort of Jimmy Webb modern pop style under the guidance of a member of the Four Seasons. That band that Frankie Valli sang was called Bob Gaudio, and Watertown was like a little beautiful song cycle, very sparse instrumentation, telling the story of a man who loses his love in a small suburban American town. And it's very nice, and it's very clipped and very understated and very subtle and very classy. And I thought, this sounds pretty, a bit like the Car by Arctic Monkeys. And I thought perhaps I was going out on a limb, but then I read an interview that Alex Turner did recently with the LA Times. And who
Mm.
does Alex Turner name drop but Frank Sinatra? But he doesn't mention Watertown. He says that the Frank Sinatra album I'm listening to right now is Live at the Sands, which came out in
Much,
1966, and
much earlier,
it's
yeah.
Sinatra in Vegas, and he's got the Count Basie Orchestra behind him, conducted
Mm.
by a very young Quincy Jones. So it's a great album, Live at the Sands, and it's not quite Watertown, but I was vaguely on the money when it came to that, I think.
How much, Graham, and this is me taking longer than we should on this topic, but I'm just wondering if with Alex Turner, it's because he is such a brilliant lyricist that is actually what's marking, more than the arrangements, is marking out Alex Turner's ability.
Well, the song's built around the lyrics almost more
Yes.
than the melody. He
Mm.
spends so much time hand carving each line
Mm.
that the music has to fit the lyrics, otherwise it doesn't work at all, which is quite an unusual approach for a pop songwriter. Usually the melody or the riff in the chorus, defines the song, and then the lyrics fit around that. But he's almost the opposite way. You're right.
Mm. Mm. I've played it a lot since your recommendation, and
What do you
I
think?
I'm loving it much more than the last album. I'm really
Mm-hmm.
loving it, and it is partly the arrangements. I think this is a mature band, a mature sound, absolutely at ease with itself as well. And I think that's lovely as well, that a band doesn't feel under pressure in any way to be commercial. It is being
Mm.
true. It is being true to making music, which I think is what you want a band to be able to do at that stage, not to be, come on, where's the hits? Come on, where's the hits? It's not that kind of album.
The
It's
last album
beautifully
sounded
arranged. It's very
exactly.
atmospheric.
The last album sounded very worked on, and this
Yes.
sounds effortlessly classy. It sounds
I
sophisticated without
yes.
too much effort.
That's a good. It is sophisticated, Graham. That's
Mm.
which you think, Sheffield roots, sophistication. If you could have predicted that from Arctic Monkeys at the start, no way. But that's what's
Oh,
grown.
yeah.
That's what's grown.
Well, yeah, they've done a David Bowie, haven't they? They've sort of changed as they've gone along, and they've
Yeah.
experimented and gone out on a limb. So
Mm.
very impressive.
This is their sound and vision and fashion era. Absolutely. Yeah. So, Graham, there's that interruption. Now, the last major topic, says he, tapping his phone to discover it, is, Graham, we're going to be suggesting a link between two novels: Jack Kerouac's The Dharma the Dharma Bums from 1959, and rather more recently, Thomas Pynchon's Vineland. And you say that what is the thread between the two novels, and then more crucially, what breaks that thread?
Well, basically, they're 31 years apart, and they're not usually linked together. But
No.
if you read both books, The Dharma Bums by Kerouac and Vineland by Thomas Pynchon, the actual style, before we get to the content, which is links as well, the
Mm,
style's very similar. There's an
mm,
awful lot of rambling in both books, an awful lot of lengthy descriptions, an awful lot of paragraphless writing, which goes on for sometimes almost a whole page. And they both do that. But the point of that isn't because they're rambling. It's partly
mm.
that they build up the story through details, little details, like Dickens used to do. But it's
Yeah.
partly that they also, all the rambling and the free flowing tide of words
Mm,
leads occasionally when you least expect it. And they both do this, Kerouac and Pynchon, to sudden moments of revelation, because what they're really trying to achieve in their books, without telling you the answer, they're trying to make you realize something profound, like it was a natural occurrence. And they both do that. So that's quite similar. But on top of that, what makes them interesting is that they're both quite hard boiled writers. There's a little bit of Raymond Chandler about both the writing.
mm.
That sort of like cynical. They both understand the world isn't as idealistic as they both like to be. They both recognize what the real world's really like, just like Raymond Chandler did with his great detective novels. And
Exactly.
on top of that, they both share another attribute which goes against what you think they're doing in the rest of their writing. They both have that sort of F. Scott Fitzgerald sense of wistful nostalgia about America not being as good as it used to be, or the American dream not being what it was before. And they both share that as well. So even though they're not usually linked together, those things are pretty damn similar. And on top of that, the content's also the same, because
Mm,
the content really is about the place of people in America who don't agree with the American obsession with money and the American obsession with power and winning and consumerism. And both books address that specifically on several occasions. And both books represent people who don't go along with that, who want a different world. And that they're both basically writing the same book. But there is a difference because there's a 31-year gap. And when Kerouac wrote the Dharma Bumps, 1959, the 60s hadn't happened yet.
No.
That idealistic decade of change and revolution and reform hadn't happened. So there's a sense in Kerouac that the world he wanted to see happen might actually happen at some point. And with Vineland coming out in 1990, even though it's set in the early 80s during the Reagan era, Thomas Pynchon hasn't got that sense of hope because the 60s, although it achieved quite a lot, ultimately failed politically and was replaced by hard right-wing politics, which is sort of endured to this day. So
Exactly.
in Vineland and Pynchon's book, that whole optimism for the future is totally gone. It's much more, there's a bigger sense of sadness about Pynchon than Kerouac because he hasn't quite got the hope because he knows that it's not going to happen.
Do they, Graham? I mean, is that the American dream? Do you think it's fair to say it's often been misappropriated? That actually, what a novelist might want from the American dream, and that could be any number of American novelists. The American dream is never that. It's rather like the promise of the second coming. It might never
What
happen.
era was? Well, yeah, but exactly. Which era of American history was the American dream operating? Was it when they first had the original War of Independence against Britain, when they only had like the Eastern Seaboard states? Really, is it when the Wild West started to come into being, when they started spreading across the continent? Is it the 1910s and 20s when its industrial boom made it the biggest economic nation in the world? Is it when it became a world superpower after the Second World War, when you had the consumer boom in the 1950s? At what point did the American dream actually work? And if you look at all those eras, it never really worked at any point. It was only at best partially true and partly real to the average person. So the American dream is well named because it's a dream. It never really existed.
But it's interesting, is it? The American dream is what drew the Irish across, for example, the Irish diaspora to New York. The Italians, likewise, they were drawn to this idea of an American dream. But it's a myth, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I think there's probably a difference is that it's not that America was a failure. Everybody went to America failed. We didn't. So it's almost like what's changed is that the American dream involved hope. It
Yes.
didn't guarantee success, but there was definitely a hope that you would have a better life and you would succeed. I think what's changed the last 30, 40 years, partly because of the economy and partly because of politics, is that sense of hope that you can succeed is sort of gone. And so the American dream's been dying as a result of that. It's not the American dream ever operated fully, but it doesn't seem to operate at all now.
No, it's all down to money now, more and more. Is it? I mean, it's interesting, the idea of migration and wanting to travel, and that thought of, is there a British dream? Is that why people still want to come to this country? Is it? But again, what dream are they being sold? Why is it that people want to come when we don't? Most of us don't like our own country at all anymore. So why do people still think of it as some kind of dream to come here?
The British dream is that we are very clever, very intelligent, very successful, very civilized, very polite, wouldn't hurt a fly. The British dream is a bit different. It's more about manners, and our manners are supposed to be impeccable. Of course, in the real world, that isn't the case and never was the case. And if you look at the 19th century Britain and see how workers were treated and children were treated and how half the world was treated when the empire.
That's the point. How half the world was treated.
Again, like the American dream, the British dream was only ever partly true.
Exactly. And yet people seem to still feel there's a form of dream that they believe in, be it the cliched images that are presented in films in particular, of a form of Britishness. And yet we've rejected it. We ourselves have largely rejected that. And yet we've become more insular.
British dream. No, but there's an alternative British dream. If you look at Paddington, for example, that lofty artistic film, that's really about Britain being multicultural and open and tolerant, and coffee culture and cafe culture and pavement culture and halloumi paste, and and that's the alternative modern version of the British dream. And the Richard Curtis films had a bit of the same thing.
Yeah.
His comedies were hugely successful in the early noughties. That's the Blair Brown dream. So there is an alternative British dream, which Danny Boyle, for example, at the British Olympics, London in 2012, he represented a different version of Britain. But again, that self's only partly true, because Britain's always veered between doing the right thing and just being based on power and greed and all the things that lots of other countries are based on.
But I think it's why art thrives in this country, because the underbelly of it all is that we know there's that version that you've described, that something like Danny Boyle, the fact that he was able to do that to the world, to put across a really strongly political statement about Britain against everything that was being put forward at the time about Britain. He presented an entirely different worldview on that, which I think tapped into an awful lot more of what British people actually think is the truth about this country. And the fact that that could happen says a lot about this country, that our arts can present that alternative view to the world.
Yeah, well, culture is very important in Britain, because Britain's a very old country, so it's very rule-based. There's rules for everything, sometimes written, sometimes not. So the only way you can actually escape that system, because you can't beat it, there's just too many rules, is through culture. In culture, you create a different version of the world, a world that you'd like to live in and like to see happen. And that's why culture is so important in Britain, because it's the only true way of changing things.
Absolutely. And yet, obviously, radical change happens, development happens, as we've said many times before, with science as well, which is when I go back to my point about the Van Gogh immersive experience, where science can play its part in the arts. Interestingly, you thought it maybe made it a little synthetic, but overall, I still think that's the perfect balance. A bond with science, bringing new technology into the arts, but the arts using new technology in thrilling, inventive, and exciting ways.
Yeah, I've never been that interested in technology. I prefer content over technique.
The content is the result of the technology.
Yeah, that's a good argument. Possibly.
Graham, I'll just say one word to you. Well, I say three words. Dare. There's 4 words. Dare by Human League.
Yeah, you got me there. I'm not going to argue. Yeah, I realised I've created a pit of disaster from my argument there that I'm falling into. So I'm gonna have to surrender. You've got me on this one. I have actually stumbled and fallen.
Now I wonder whether, before we get cut off again with Anthony's brilliant editing, the final one, the link between bootleg Beatles and Pink Floyd.
Oh yeah, well I talked to Steve White, the Paul McCartney and the bootleg Beatles, and I've talked to 3 John Lennons before, but never a Paul McCartney. And he told me, amongst many interesting things, about how in 1996, David Gilmour, for his 50th birthday, hired the bootleg Beatles, and I think it might have been the Counterfeit Stones, to play for his birthday party. And he was the headliner. So, and the reason he did that is because he always wanted Pink Floyd to headline over the Beatles and the Stones.
Brilliant.
Which is a really interesting thought, that Gilmour is so competitive. Who would have thought it?
That's magnificent. So, because the bootleg Beatles lineup changes rather more than it used to. It was long running for a long time, but it's going through. I think so. You've done three John Lennons now. You see, that confirms it, doesn't it?
Yeah, they're all 3 John Lennons, but only 1 Paul McCartney. But yeah, there's none of the original members. I mean, it was first formed in 1980, and there's none of the original members of the bootleg Beatles left now.
No, which is fair enough, because
they keep on regenerating.
They couldn't really pull off the look any longer, could they?
Well, no, because they have to cover from the early mop tops to the beards and the long hair. So you can't do early mop tops if you look about 70, obviously.
No.
I mean, even Paul McCartney doesn't try that one.
Absolutely. I'm just going to trumpet myself here, because I was reading Far Out magazine's top 50 albums of the year. And what did you think they chose as number 1?
Oh, good grief. Yard Act.
Correct. They did choose Yard Act.
And wait a minute, and what did you choose as your number 1?
I chose Yard Act.
No,
I chose Yard Act.
That means this is for the 3rd time this podcast you're right. This is just terrible. I may have to give up.
Splendid. Well, we'll say goodnight, Graham.
You've been listening to the podcast Two Big Egos in a Small Car. Your hosts were Graham Chalmers and Charles Hutchinson. This was a Baltic sub-production.